The Western world continues to unite against this seventh day of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. On foreign policy, there's virtually no debate that Putin is the aggressor, proactively starting a war of choice, violating the territorial integrity and the human rights of the people in this neighboring independent country. On economic policy, which we were just discussing, there are these punishing sanctions that show a consensus for multilateral action, even at high costs for many other citizenries that could have said they just want to sit out the conflict, but again, are united in standing up to Putin. And across the U.S., there's wide support for U.S. policy on these fronts and against Putin, except for one persistent wing of the Republican Party, where backing Trump now overlaps with extreme tributes to Putin, including Trump marveling at Putin's, quote, smart invasion just this weekend, which comes after Trump dubbed him a genius, while also saying that the military incursion was appalling. Then you have Trump's former CIA director and Secretary of State on a similar path, noting that he has, quote, respect for Putin's shrewd, capable leadership. And that's a hard angle to play right now, considering Russians are in these long lines for cash as their currency crashes. And let's be clear, there are multiple ways to look at any complex foreign conflict. It's one thing to claim a kind of neutrality about Russia's squabbles with their former republics. It's another thing to claim with a straight face that Putin is showing some great capable results right now. The American right-wing project to coddle and minimize this Russian dictator is, quite honestly, one of the strangest developments in the politics of U.S. foreign policy ever. I mean that. Now, Donald Trump had his personally conflicted and cozy relationship with Putin, but you don't reverse decades of Cold War culture in a single term, even one as eccentric and intense as Donald Trump's. No, if you look, this actually goes much deeper. And it matters as the U.S. is now part of this alliance trying to contain an aggressive nuclear Russia under Putin. How did the Republican Party go from the party of McCarthy and his Red Scare, of crushing on Ronald Reagan, of demanding walls be torn down, to this now open and somewhat common Putin praise, even in wartime? It's a bizarre evolution. And the reasoning for it has something of a bizarre answer. It dates back, we think, at least to when Republicans turned to really prioritize style and trolling and reality TV type comebacks to Barack Obama as their primary political language. And they were pushing up more brash personalities like Sarah Palin, or in the talk realm, Rush Limbaugh and Bill O'Reilly back in those 90s days, too. Because they began to view Putin not through policy. Ronald Reagan would have obviously opposed Putin's foreign policy right now. But the right started to view him through style, a kind of reduction of foreign policy to who might just make the most supposedly macho leader on the cover of a right-wing GQ. Fox personalities even dreamed about a strong man like Putin being president instead of Obama.
Can I just make a special request in the magic lamp? Can we get like Netanyahu or like Putin in for 48 hours, head of the United States? I don't know. I just want somebody to get in here and get it done right.
Yes, Putin would get it done right for America, despite being literally against American interests and NATO and everything else. And back to that era, pre-Trump, you had conservative voices like Bill O'Reilly and Sarah Palin lavishing praise on Putin as a way to hammer Obama.
People are looking at Putin as one who wrestles bears and drills for oil. They look at our president as one who wears mom jeans and equivocates and bloviates.
The Russian leader sees himself as a macho man who's going to do pretty much what he wants. The president sees himself as a Renaissance man who wants to accommodate.
Putin decides what he wants to do, and he does it in half a day. He makes a decision, and he executes it quickly. Then everybody reacts. That's what you call a leader.
Yes. It was very, very dumb. It did not age well. But it's not irrelevant. It matters. And it may have seemed then in some of those clips I just showed you as a method to merely evince contempt for President Obama. But a former aide to that president actually says it goes much further and deeper to a disturbingly authentic admiration for the non-democratic ethnic petro-state that Putin's created, kind of like an ideal red state that Republicans would like America to emulate. That aide, Chai Komanduri, notes Putin also has his raft of anti-LGBTQT laws, which is why major MAGA voices like Steve Bannon and GOP Senate candidates like J.D. Vance cite Putin's anti-equality domestic policies.
We did not serve in the Marine Corps to go and fight Vladimir Putin because he didn't believe in transgender rights, right? Which is what the U.S. State Department is saying is a major problem with Russia.
Putin ain't woke. He is anti-woke.
The Russians, people still know which bathroom to use.
They know how many genders are there in Russia?
2.
Some of that could sound like just sort of cherry-picking political hobby horses, as those folks have to make their content. But Donald Trump very literally wanted America to treat democracy here like Putin does over there. Donald Trump was caught and investigated for trying to get the FBI and authorities to go after his opponents, which is what Putin already does quite blatantly at home. All of this came full circle today as a top Putin diplomat, the ambassador to the UN for that country, both trolled Biden and basically was echoing Trump by falsely casting his loss as a big lie that overthrew what would have been his second term.
The United States, where the legitimately elected president of the country was overthrown.
This is not a drill. That Obama veteran I mentioned, Chai Komanduri, is here when we're back in just 60 seconds.
I look at Russia, who, can we give a round of applause for Russia? Yes. Absolutely, absolutely.
The happy cheers for Russia and Putin at a far-right political conference. That was just this weekend. I quoted former Obama aide Chai Komanduri. He is my guest tonight. Good to see you, sir.
Good to see you, Ari.
We quoted you in looking at the roots of this because it goes way beyond Trump. And it has to be in a time of all of these problems and some unpredictable developments, I would say, in America in the last 5 years. Particularly strange to see the party of Joe McCarthy at the extreme edge of the Red Scare or Ronald Reagan at more of the muscular foreign policy plank go to cheering Putin as he invades Ukraine. Your breakdown.
Yeah, I think it's very important to note that the GOP admiration for Putin actually predates Donald Trump. He did not necessarily initiate it or lead it when it really began. And the reason it began is because in many ways, Vladimir Putin's Russia really exemplifies a lot of the ideas that Republicans talk about. Russia is the ideal red state. And I mean red as in Republican, not necessarily red as in communist. Russia is a fossil fuel economy. It is a country where the religious right has a tremendous power in making social policy, which you discussed when it came to LGBTQ issues. It is a country that is a militaristic power, a military powerhouse, perhaps maybe not as much as we thought so before this invasion, but they are a country that actually spends more of their GDP on the military than the United States does. It is a ethno-state that prioritizes the identity of white Russians. It is a country where democracy has been successfully rolled back and an alpha male leader is now in place. In all of these areas, we are seeing Republicans articulate a lot of these ideas. Vladimir Putin has put them in practice, which is why so many of them have admired him all these years.
And we look at the strong nature of the right-wing media machine. I don't know what that would have done in the Reagan era. In many ways, he was, of course, a very effective communicator, the first Hollywood president, etc. But whatever you want to say about Reagan's policies, he had some. And he had a view of trying to box in through arms control and arms escalation. So, you know, both mechanisms, hard power as well as soft, which we were discussing earlier in the hour, ways to deal with Gorbachev and the Soviet Union. We don't see any of that here in the discussion about Russia and Putin. As I put it, it's all at a GQ reality TV level. And I mentioned that in showing a little bit of Tucker Carlson, who I just want to say before I show this clip, we know from Tucker Carlson's writing that he is not this dumb. We know that he is pitching a level of foreign policy analysis that is far beneath his ability. Call this the soft bigotry of expectations of Tucker Carlson from 10 years ago, right, if you will. But he knows what he's doing when he does this. Take a look.
Democrats in Washington have told you have a patriotic duty to hate Vladimir Putin. It's not a suggestion, it's a mandate. It might be worth asking yourself, since it is getting pretty serious, what is this really about? Why do I hate Putin so much? Has Putin ever called me a racist?
Chai?
Well, what's really interesting is I remember when conservatives criticized Muhammad Ali when he took the Olympic torch in 1996 at the Olympics, and they criticized him for his opposition to the Vietnam War, if you remember, because he said, you know, no Viet Cong ever used a racial slur against him. It's interesting that that is the exact logic that Tucker Carlson is now using to really justify this invasion. And we have to remember Muhammad Ali never, in no way, really supported, you know, the North Korean.
That's wild. I hadn't thought, I don't know if I've heard anyone else draw that connection, Muhammad Ali's memorable phrase, but yes, that it's sort of being flipped in a weird right-wing perversion, which is fascinating when you say that. What do you think of the breakdown of Tucker trying to convince people that there is no substantive reason to have adversaries abroad? I mean, as if you would just accept all foreign leaders and not have any U.S.-based interests. How does that truck with American exceptionalism or America First or any of that?
Well, it's completely morally bankrupt, and it's completely the opposite of what Republicans and conservatives have talked about, really going back to the Cold War era. I mean, Tucker Carlson said just because it doesn't affect him, therefore America should have no role. It should stay out. But I think it's actually even more insidious if you think about like the history with Tucker and Viktor Orban and the Republicans in general, and how much they have admired Putin over the years. You know, one of the big aspects was that Vladimir Putin's Russia is very much the opposite of Barack Obama's America. Barack Obama was somebody who believed in diversity, democracy, a knowledge-based economy. You know, he very much was comfortable being a gentleman leader, not a Putinish thug. The Republicans didn't like that model, and they went and found a Putin of their own in Donald Trump. And that's exactly that's someone who they still admire, and that's exactly where they went. And that's where Tucker still wants to go. That's why he talks up Vladimir Putin, Viktor Orban, and these other dictators now.
Yeah, you make a very subtle point about the sort of elevation of that version of their politics abroad. Have you seen The Great on Hulu yet?
No, I have not. You're talking about Catherine the Great, that miniseries about Catherine the Great?
They have a character it's a satirical view, and it's of old Russia of a different era, but they have a religious character from the sort of the imagined Russian Orthodox Church who's very against any reforms, science, art, the future. And at one point he's scripted saying, why does everyone always talk about the future like it's an improvement? It may be a decline, which is a traditional, sometimes conservative view. Buckley and others talk that way. And you seem to be arguing that in part this sort of right-wing obsession or fascination with these certain places, as you call them, ethno-nationalist, and also kind of throwbacks to, again, someone who Donald Trump ran on Reagan's slogan. The plagiarized slogan of Reagan was "Make America Great Again," which is a throwback, the idea that for some people, the 50s in the right-wing fantasy were better than today. Chai.
Yeah, and that is always a hallmark of conservative thinking. It's always the idea that the past was somehow better and that we need to reach back to the past and find models for the future, if you will. And that's, it's interesting that last night, one of the responses the Republicans made to Biden's State of the Union was basically saying, drill, baby, drill. I mean, that's more or less what Governor Reynolds was saying when she said we need more oil and more gas production. Fossil fuel economies of the kind that Russia has actually lend themselves to social conservatism. We see that with the Middle East. We see that with Red America here. That is actually a thing that we should really keep in mind when we talk about climate change and fossil fuel economies. It's not just about air pollution and climate change. I would also argue it has some level of protecting democracy and creating a better future for people, which is why I think Republicans are so staunchly talking about coal mining jobs, fossil fuel economies. Vladimir Putin, very much Russia, John McCain said, is a gas station masquerading as a country.
From Muhammad Ali to the great, to the late John McCain, We've been around the bend. But plenty to think about, and that last point is really interesting about the petro-politics and what is the cost of that, because the human cost could not be higher right now in that troubled region. Chai Komanduri, good to see you as always, sir.
Good to be here, Ari.
Absolutely.